My name is Marilyn Turner, and at 62 years old, I never expected to be slapped by my own daughter at her wedding. Catherine was always concerned with appearances, with impressing others, with what people thought. But when her hand struck my cheek in front of 200 guests, something unexpected happened. Instead of crying, I laughed. The entire reception went silent as I revealed a truth I'd kept hidden for decades, a truth that made my perfect poised daughter turn white as her wedding gown. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a painful family situation, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our community of truth tellers. Believe me, what I revealed next shocked everyone. I wasn't always a single mother. When Catherine was born, Tom and I were young in love and had modest dreams for our future. We lived in a small two-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio. Tom worked as an electrical engineer at a local manufacturing plant, and I was finishing my nursing degree. We were happy. Catherine was a beautiful baby with her father's dark curls and my green eyes. Tom adored her, spending hours just watching her sleep or making silly faces to hear her giggle. Those early years were simple but filled with joy. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. Everything changed when Catherine was 8 years old. Tom was driving home from work during a thunderstorm when another driver lost control on the wet road. The crash was instantaneous, fatal. One moment I had a husband, Catherine had a father, and the next moment we were on our own. The grief was overwhelming, consuming. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor after Catherine was asleep, sobbing silently into a towel so she wouldn't hear me. But during daylight hours, I forced myself to function, to be both mother and father to my confused, heartbroken little girl. In those early days after Tom's death, Catherine was clingy, often crawling into my bed in the middle of the night, asking in a small voice when Daddy was coming back. Those questions broke my heart anew each time. Gradually, her grief transformed into a quiet sadness, and then something else began to emerge. By the time Catherine entered middle school, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She became increasingly concerned with what her friends had: the right clothes, the newest gadgets, vacations to exciting places. Our modest home and lifestyle, which had once been enough, began to chafe at her. "Why can't we live in a bigger house like Stephanie's family?" she asked one day as I drove her home from school. "Her mum doesn't even work, and they have a pool and a game room." I explained as gently as I could that different families had different circumstances, that I was doing my best as a nurse, but that we had to live within our means. "But it's not fair," she protested, arms crossed over her chest. "We never get to do anything fun." This became a common refrain. Despite my efforts to provide special moments, movie nights with homemade popcorn, weekend trips to local state parks, crafting projects on rainy days, Catherine increasingly focused on what we didn't have rather than what we did. When she turned 13, Catherine begged for dance lessons. The studio she wanted was expensive, catering to affluent families who didn't blink at the monthly fees or the costs of costumes for recitals. I worked extra shifts, cutting back on my own expenses to make it happen. The night I told her she could join, her face lit up with genuine joy for the first time in months. "Really, Mum? Really, really?" she squealed, throwing her arms around my neck. "Really, really?" I confirmed, savoring the feel of her spontaneous hug. At the dance studio, Catherine found herself among girls from much wealthier backgrounds. Girls with designer clothes and summer homes whose parents drove luxury cars and hosted elaborate birthday parties. Girls who received expensive gifts for no special occasion at all. I watched her absorb this different world, saw her beginning to measure our life against theirs and finding us wanting. When it came time to buy her dance recital outfit, She was devastated that we had to purchase a second-hand costume from a previous student. "Everyone will know it's used," she said, tears streaming down her face. "No one will notice," I assured her. "And you dance so beautifully, they'll only be watching your performance." But Catherine was inconsolable. That night I heard her on the phone with her best friend. "It's so embarrassing," she whispered. "My mum just doesn't understand. She never does." The pattern continued through high school. Catherine excelled academically, making honor roll every semester. I was tremendously proud of her intelligence and work ethic. But alongside her academic achievements grew a hardening resentment toward our financial limitations, and increasingly toward me. She began to criticize everything about me: my practical haircut, my comfortable nursing scrubs, the older model car I drove, the way I pronounced certain words. Nothing I did was sophisticated enough. Nothing about me impressed her friends or their parents. When Catherine was 16, I overheard her describing me to a new friend. "My mum's just a nurse," she said, her tone dismissive. "Nothing special." Those words stung more than she could know. I had worked so hard, taken on so much responsibility, sacrificed my own dreams to give her a stable, loving home. To hear it all reduced to nothing special felt like a betrayal. Still, I understood that adolescence was difficult, that fitting in mattered desperately at that age. I hoped that as she matured, Catherine would recognize the value of hard work, of living authentically, rather than for appearances. I believed that underneath her growing materialism was still that sweet little girl who had once been content with simple pleasures. So I continued making sacrifices. When she needed a laptop for school, I postponed replacing our aging refrigerator. When her peers started driving, I helped her buy a used car instead of taking the planned vacation I'd been saving for. When prom came around, I spent a month's worth of grocery money on her dress, doing extra night shifts to make up the difference. "Thanks, Mom," she said, twirling in front of the mirror in her blue satin gown. For a brief moment, her genuine smile returned, and I thought, perhaps things are changing. But the moment was fleeting. By her senior year, Catherine had her sights set on prestigious universities far from our modest neighborhood. She applied to multiple schools, all expensive, all in major cities. "But how will we afford these?" I asked, gently reviewing the tuition figures that made my head spin. "I'll get scholarships," she said confidently, "and student loans. And maybe you could take out a parent loan." I hesitated, thinking of my limited savings, my retirement still not fully funded. "We'll need to be practical, Catherine. The state university has an excellent program and would be much more affordable." Her expression hardened. "I am not staying in this boring town with you forever. I'm going somewhere that matters." Her words sliced through me, but I said nothing. Later that night, alone in my room, I made a decision that would change everything, though Catherine wouldn't know it for many years to come. When acceptance letters arrived in spring, Catherine was thrilled to receive an offer from Westmore University, an elite school in Boston with an excellent business program. What she didn't know was the complicated reality behind her scholarship. "I got a full ride, Mum," she exclaimed, waving the letter. "See, I told you I could do it." I smiled and hugged her, keeping my secret. The truth was more complex. Catherine had indeed received a partial academic scholarship, but it covered less than half of the exorbitant tuition. The remainder would come from a source she knew nothing about. After Tom's death, his life insurance policy had paid out $500,000. It was far more money than I'd ever had at once, and my first instinct had been to create a more comfortable life for us both. Perhaps a nicer home in a better neighborhood, maybe even private school for Catherine. But watching her growing sense of entitlement, I made a different choice. Instead of revealing the money's existence, I invested it carefully, earmarking it for Catherine's future education and early adult life. I wanted her to believe in her own accomplishments, to develop grit and work ethic, not to expect things to be handed to her. So I continued living frugally, working my nursing shifts, maintaining our modest lifestyle, all while the insurance money grew untouched. When college acceptances arrived, I quietly arranged to pay the remaining tuition balance, letting Catherine believe her academic achievements had earned her a full scholarship. It was a deception born of love and concern, one I sometimes questioned but ultimately believed was right. Catherine left for Boston with a mixture of excitement and disdain. Finally, she sighed as we packed her belongings. A fresh start where no one knows I come from. This. Her gesture encompassed our small home, and by extension, me. During her college years, Catherine's calls became increasingly infrequent. When she did call, it was often to complain about her broke status compared to wealthier classmates, or to request extra money for spring break trips or clothing. Each time I would send a small amount from my regular savings, maintaining the fiction that we had limited means. "You don't understand how embarrassing it is," she said during her sophomore year. "Everyone goes out to these amazing restaurants and I have to count every penny." "Perhaps you could suggest more affordable options sometimes," I offered. "Real friends would understand." "You just don't get it," she snapped. "This isn't your world." She was right, though, not in the way she meant. I had never valued the external trappings of success the way Catherine did. My friendships were based on mutual support and genuine connection, not where we dined or what brands we wore. Catherine rarely came home during breaks, preferring to visit classmates' vacation homes or stay on campus for additional courses. When she did visit, she spent much of her time texting friends or complaining about our town's lack of amenities. During her senior year, Catherine called with unexpected news. "Mum, I've been offered a position at Meridian Consulting in New York after graduation." Her voice bubbled with genuine excitement. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." And I was. Despite our differences, I never doubted Catherine's intelligence or determination. "The starting salary is amazing. I can finally have the life I deserve." Those words, "the life I deserve," gave me pause. What did she think she deserved, and why? What had I failed to teach her about gratitude, about finding joy in things money couldn't buy? After graduation, Catherine moved to a small but expensive apartment in New York City. Unknown to her, I had used some of Tom's insurance money to pay her security deposit, and first month's rent again, letting her believe it came from her own signing bonus. I hoped that establishing herself independently in the city would finally bring her satisfaction and perhaps some perspective. But as Catherine's career flourished, her materialism only intensified. Her social media became a showcase of expensive restaurants, designer purchases, and exclusive events. When we spoke, she talked more about what she had acquired than what she had experienced or learned. 2 years into her New York life, Catherine met Richard Bennett, a financial analyst from a wealthy Connecticut family. Their courtship was a whirlwind of luxury helicopter rides over the city weekends, in the Hamptons, skiing trips to Aspen. The first time I met Richard was during a weekend when they came to Ohio. Catherine had warned him about our humble circumstances, a phrase that stung, but which I let pass without comment. Richard was polite, but clearly uncomfortable in my home, his eyes taking in the worn furniture and outdated kitchen with poorly concealed judgment. "My mum's never been much for decorating," Catherine explained with a tight smile, as if my modest home were a character flaw rather than a reflection of financial priorities that had ironically benefited her greatly. When I met Richard's parents at an upscale restaurant in Cleveland a few months later, the class distinction was even more pronounced. Linda and Howard Bennett were old money polished with impeccable manners that somehow still conveyed their sense of superiority. "Catherine tells us you're in healthcare," Linda said over appetizers. How nice to have a practical career. I've been a nurse for over 30 years, I replied. It's been very rewarding. I'm sure, she murmured, exchanging a look with Howard that spoke volumes. Throughout dinner, Catherine steered conversation away from my life and work, highlighting instead the impressive aspects of her own career. When Howard asked about Catherine's childhood, she spoke as if she'd overcome great adversity. Mum did her best after Dad died, she said, patting my hand condescendingly. It wasn't easy, but it made me stronger, more determined to succeed. I remained silent, swallowing both the food and the hurt her revisionist history caused. In Catherine's new narrative, our life together had been a hardship to overcome, rather than a foundation built with love. After dinner in our hotel room, I gently attempted to address the evening's undercurrents. Richard's parents seem very traditional, I began carefully. They have standards, Mum, Catherine replied while removing her makeup. They've worked hard to maintain their position in society, and you feel we haven't worked hard? She sighed impatiently. It's different. You worked for a paycheck. They built something lasting, created a legacy. I thought of the educational foundation I'd created for her, the sacrifices that had enabled her current life. There are different kinds of legacies, Catherine. She didn't respond, already scrolling through her phone, our conversation apparently over. As their relationship progressed, Catherine included me in her life even less. I was introduced to very few of their friends and was invited to only one dinner party at their apartment, where I felt distinctly out of place among media executives and finance professionals. At that dinner, I overheard Catherine explaining me to a curious guest. My mother was in medicine. She said the deliberate vagueness, turning my decades of nursing into something more prestigious. She's retired now. Later, when we were alone in the kitchen, I confronted her gently. I'm not retired, Catherine, and I'm not ashamed of being a nurse. I know you're not ashamed, Mum, she said, lowering her voice. But these people, they make assumptions. I'm just trying to make things easier. Easier for whom? I asked. She had no answer, but her expression told me everything easier for her, easier than acknowledging her working-class roots among her carefully curated social circle. When Richard proposed 6 months later with a diamond ring that probably cost more than my annual salary, Catherine's transformation into someone I barely recognized seemed complete. The wedding planning began immediately, and with it a new chapter in our increasingly strained relationship. The day Catherine called to announce her engagement, her voice buzzed with excitement. Richard proposed last night. We're getting married at the Westbrook estate next June. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Congratulations, sweetheart, I said, genuinely happy for her happiness. I'm looking forward to helping with the planning. Oh, she hesitated. Well, we've actually already hired Valerie Simmons. She's the top wedding planner in the city. But I'm sure there will be small things you can help with. That set the tone for the entire wedding planning process. Every suggestion I offered was politely but firmly declined. Every tradition I mentioned was deemed outdated or not their style. I was consulted on nothing, not the venue, not the menu, not even the guest list. 3 months into planning, Catherine called with an unexpected question. Mum, how much are you planning to contribute to the wedding? The question caught me off guard. Catherine knew my circumstances, or what she believed were my circumstances. I've saved about $10,000, I said, which was true from my regular savings. I'd be happy to contribute that. The silence that followed was deafening. 10,000? Catherine finally repeated, her voice flat with disappointment. Mum, the flowers alone cost more than that. I understand this is a fraction of your total budget, I acknowledged, but it's what I can afford. Richard's parents are covering the majority of expenses. she continued as if I hadn't spoken. They're being incredibly generous. This puts me in an awkward position. I'm sorry if you feel embarrassed by what I can offer, I said, a familiar hurt blooming in my chest. But I've always been honest about my financial situation. Another silence. Maybe you could contribute in other ways, she eventually suggested. Something more behind the scenes. I later learned what behind the scenes meant. My name was listed under special thanks in the wedding program, not as mother of the bride. I was not included in the wedding website's story of the couple. My $10,000 check was never formally acknowledged. As the wedding date approached, conflicts over my role and appearance intensified. Catherine insisted I buy a specific designer dress that cost nearly $4,000. I can't afford that, I said firmly. I've found a lovely dress at Nordstrom that's within my budget. Mum, please, she pleaded. Everyone will be dressed at a certain level. I don't want you to feel out of place. What she meant, of course, was that she didn't want me to make her feel out of place. The Nordstrom dress is beautiful and appropriate, I insisted. That's what I'll be wearing. Catherine's disappointment was palpable, but she eventually conceded. Fine, but please have your hair and makeup professionally done at least. I'll arrange and pay for that. I agreed to this compromise, though the idea of being made over to be acceptable at my own daughter's wedding left a bitter taste. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received the final seating arrangement for the reception. I was seated at a table far from the bridal party, with distant acquaintances of Richard's family. When I called Catherine to discuss this, her assistant answered. Catherine's extremely busy with final arrangements, she explained, but I can pass along a message. Please tell her I'd like to discuss the seating arrangements, I said. Catherine texted back hours later. Seating is finalized. Valerie spent weeks optimizing social dynamics. At the rehearsal dinner hosted by Richard's parents at an exclusive club, I was once again relegated to the periphery. Linda Bennett, resplendent in designer silk, made a point of stopping by my table. We're so pleased Catherine found Richard, she said, champagne flute in hand. He's been such a positive influence. She's come so far from her beginnings. I smiled politely while seething inside. Catherine has always been exceptional. Richard is lucky to have her. Linda's smile tightened. Yes, well, we're all very fortunate in our own ways, aren't we? Some more than others. As she walked away, I noticed Catherine watching our interaction from across the room, her expression anxious. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, laughing at something Richard's father said. That night, back in my hotel room, I lay awake, questioning my choices. Had keeping Tom's insurance money secret been a mistake? Had my intentions to foster independence and gratitude instead somehow contributed to Catherine's shame about her upbringing? Should I reveal the truth now before the wedding? But something held me back. Some instinct that told me Catherine wasn't ready to hear it, that the revelation would serve my hurt feelings rather than any constructive purpose. So I resolved to get through the wedding with grace and dignity, to be the mother Catherine needed, even if it wasn't the mother she wanted. I couldn't have imagined how dramatically those plans would change. The morning of Catherine's wedding dawned bright and clear, a picture-perfect June day. I arrived early at the Westbrook estate, a sprawling historic property with manicured gardens and a grand ballroom. A security guard checked my name against a list before reluctantly allowing me entry. I'm the mother of the bride, I explained when he hesitated. You're not on the VIP list, he replied, checking again. Just the general admission. General admission? To my own daughter's wedding. I swallowed my hurt and thanked him, making my way to the bridal suite. Inside, chaos reigned. Hairstylists, makeup artists, photographers and bridesmaids crowded the space. Catherine sat in the centre like a queen already half transformed into the magazine-perfect bride she'd dreamed of becoming. "Mum, you're early," she said, checking the time with a frown. "I thought I might help with anything last minute," I offered. "Everything's handled," she replied, gesturing to the efficient wedding planner tapping on a tablet nearby. "Valerie has it all under control." "Your hair appointment isn't for another hour," Valerie informed me without looking up from her screen. "You can wait in the garden pavilion until then." I felt dismissed, an inconvenience, rather than an integral part of this momentous day. Still, I nodded and turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You look beautiful already, Catherine." She glanced up briefly. "Thanks, Mum." I spent the next hour wandering the grounds alone, watching vendors set up the ceremony site with military precision. White chairs in perfect rows, a floral arch worth more than my car, crystal vases along the aisle filled with roses flown in from Ecuador. Everything flawless, curated, and utterly impersonal. My scheduled makeover was equally impersonal. The hairstylist and makeup artist discussed me as if I weren't present. "We need to minimize these lines. Let's go heavier on the foundation here. Can we do something about those eyebrows?" I sat silently as they transformed me into someone Catherine would find more presentable. The ceremony itself was undeniably beautiful. Catherine floated down the aisle on Richard's father's arm, a choice that had stung when she'd announced it looking like a vision in her custom gown. I watched from the front row, tears in my eyes, despite everything genuinely moved by the milestone moment. During the reception, I made polite conversation with my table mates, an elderly great-aunt of Richard's and several business associates of his father. No one from my side of the family was present. Catherine had deemed my sister too colourful, and my few close friends unnecessary additions to the already extensive guest list. After dinner, I circulated cautiously conscious of Catherine's gaze, occasionally finding me across the room. I overheard snippets of conversation catching Catherine's voice as she spoke to a cluster of elegantly dressed women. "Just my mum," she was saying. "She's a bit overwhelmed by all this. You know, small-town life and all." I froze, pain lancing through me. Just my mum. As if I were an afterthought, an obligation to be tolerated rather than the woman who had given everything for her. I retreated to the bar, ordered a sparkling water, and tried to compose myself. This was Catherine's day, I reminded myself, not the time to confront decades of accumulated hurt. After the cake cutting, I slipped away to the bridal suite, which was now empty, to retrieve the gift I'd brought, but hadn't yet had a chance to give Catherine. It was a small velvet box containing my mother's pearl earrings, simple but elegant, with tiny diamonds catching the light. A family heirloom that had been promised to Catherine since she was a little girl. I found Catherine alone in the suite, touching up her makeup. "Do you have a moment?" I asked. "I wanted to give you something special." She turned, assessing my appearance with a quick up-and-down glance. "Sure, but make it quick. We're about to do the bouquet toss." I handed her the velvet box. "These were your grandmother's. She wore them at her wedding, and I wore them at mine. I thought you might want to have them now." Catherine opened the box, her expression unchanging. "Oh, thanks, Mum. But they don't really go with my earrings. Maybe another time." She snapped the box shut and set it on the vanity dismissively. "They're not just accessories, Catherine," I said quietly. "They're family history. Mum, they're sweet, but they're a bit dated, and honestly not really my style. They're so small and well ordinary." The word ordinary hung in the air between us. It wasn't just the earrings she found disappointing. It was me, my life, my values, everything I had tried to give her. "I've been thinking," I said carefully. "Perhaps it's time I told you something about your college education." Catherine sighed impatiently. "What about it?" I got a scholarship. Remember? One of the few things that actually worked out according to plan back then. Actually, I began, but she cut me off. Mum, this isn't the time for one of your little trips down memory lane. I have 200 guests waiting, and you're in here bothering me about old jewelry and ancient history. She turned back to the mirror. By the way, I noticed your contribution wasn't reflected in the final catering bill. Dad said you probably couldn't follow through. Typical. My check was cashed 2 weeks ago, I said, my voice hardening slightly. And what do you mean Dad said Richard's father isn't your dad? Well, he's been more supportive than you ever were, she snapped, whirling to face me. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it's been having everyone know my mother could only contribute a pathetic amount to my wedding? The Bennetts had to cover almost everything. Her words hit like physical blows. I gave what I could, Catherine. You always say that. Her voice rose. Your whole life is what you could do, never what I needed you to do. Never enough for me to feel like other kids to have what they had. I worked so hard for you. I said, my own anger finally rising to meet hers. Every extra shift, every sacrifice. Sacrifice, she interrupted, her face flushing. You've never sacrificed anything. You lived exactly the small, safe little life you wanted. You never tried for more, never pushed beyond comfortable mediocrity. And you tried to limit me the same way. Guests were staring now from the hallway outside the open door. Catherine's voice had carried. Richard appeared in the doorway, his expression concerned. Everything okay in here? He asked. No, it's not okay, Catherine said, tears of anger in her eyes. My mother is trying to ruin my wedding with her petty jealousy and constant reminders of her sacrifices. I've never been jealous of your success, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. I've only wanted you to appreciate what you have and how you got it. How I got it. Catherine's laugh was bitter. I worked for everything I have. I earned my scholarship. I built my career. What exactly do I owe you for that? The moment had come. The truth I'd held back for so long hovered on my lips. But before I could speak, Catherine continued, her voice rising hysterically. You think giving birth to me entitles you to intrude on my life forever, to embarrass me in front of people who matter, to remind me constantly of where I came from when all I want is to move forward. A small crowd had gathered now. Richard's parents stood behind him, their expressions a mixture of shock and something like vindication, as if Catherine's outburst confirmed everything they'd suspected about my parenting. Catherine, please, Richard said quietly. Let's continue this discussion later. No, I'm done pretending, she said. She turned to me, eyes blazing. I've been carrying you, accommodating your feelings, including you despite everything. And what do I get in return? Criticism, judgment, pathetic little gifts no one wants. I stood very still, absorbing each blow. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet but clear. Is that really how you see me? As a burden to be carried? Yes, she exclaimed. Yes, that's exactly what you are. A reminder of everything I've worked so hard to leave behind. And then as gasps rippled through the watching crowd, Catherine did something no one expected. She slapped me across the face. The sound cracked through the sudden silence. My cheek stung, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in my heart. For a moment, no one moved. Catherine herself looked shocked at what she'd done, her hand still raised. Then, to everyone's confusion, including my own, I began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle and grew until tears streamed down my face. Not hysterical laughter, but genuine releasing amusement at the absolute absurdity of the situation. Mum, Catherine whispered, her anger giving way to confusion. I composed myself, wiping away tears that were equal parts mirth and sorrow. "Oh, Catherine," I said, my voice steady and clear enough for everyone to hear. "You have no idea what you're talking about." The entire room was silent now. Guests frozen in place. Phones forgotten in hands that had been recording the drama moments before. "Your full scholarship to Westmore University." It wasn't full. It covered less than half your tuition. The rest, over $150,000, came from me. Catherine's face registered confusion, then disbelief. "That's not possible. You couldn't afford—" "When your father died." I continued calmly. "His life insurance policy paid $500,000. I never told you because I wanted you to develop character, work ethic, appreciation for what you earned. I invested that money for your future, instead of using it to give us a more comfortable life." The colour drained from Catherine's face as I continued. "I paid for your education. I covered the security deposit and first month's rent on your New York apartment. I paid for your first car, all while letting you believe these things came from your own achievements or from minimal help that stretched my budget." Richard's mother gasped audibly. His father's expression shifted from disdain to calculation. "I still have a substantial amount left," I added. "It was meant to be your inheritance or perhaps help with your children's education someday." Catherine's expression crumpled. "Why are you only telling me this now?" "I hadn't planned to tell you today, or like this. But since you're so concerned about contributions and support, you should know the truth." I straightened my shoulders. "And you should also know that yesterday I donated the remaining money, nearly $300,000, to establish a nursing scholarship fund for single parents." The silence that followed was absolute. Catherine's face had gone from pale to ashen. "You what?" she whispered. "I realized recently that the money has done you more harm than good," I explained gently. "It's enabled a value system that measures worth by wealth rather than character. I decided it would do more good helping people who truly appreciate the opportunity for education and service." I picked up my purse from where I'd set it on a nearby chair. "Congratulations on your wedding, Catherine. I wish you and Richard every happiness." With that, I walked through the parting crowd, head high, heartbreaking but strangely unburdened. No one tried to stop me as I left the Westbrook estate and drove away from the daughter who no longer knew how to see me clearly, or perhaps never had. The 20-minute drive from Westbrook Estate to my hotel passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I didn't cry. The time for tears would come later. For now, I felt oddly calm, as if a storm that had been building for decades had finally broken, leaving devastation, but also clarity in its wake. In my hotel room, I carefully removed the professionally applied makeup and elaborate hairstyle, watching in the mirror as I transformed back into the woman Catherine had found so disappointing. The woman who had raised her alone, who had worked night shifts to afford dance lessons, who had postponed her own dreams so Catherine could pursue hers. My phone began buzzing almost immediately. Joan, my sister, calling from Arizona where she lived. "Marilyn, what's happening?" I just got 3 different texts from people at Catherine's wedding. "News travels fast," I said, surprised. "How did people even get your number?" "Facebook, I guess. Someone named Taylor said there was a huge scene with Catherine that you revealed some big secret about money." I sighed and told Joan everything. The slap, my laughter, the revelation, and finally my decision about the remaining money. "You donated it," Joan gasped. "All of it." "It was mine to give," I said simply. "Tom would have approved, I think." But Catherine, she must have been shocked. Angry, embarrassed, all of the above. I sank onto the bed. I don't regret telling the truth. I just regret the circumstances that made it necessary. After talking with Joan, more calls came in. Harriet, my oldest friend, who had not been invited to the wedding. Several former colleagues who had heard through the efficient grapevine of hospital gossip. Even Dr. Martin, who had been Tom's physician and friend. Most surprising was a call from Linda Bennett late that evening. "Marilyn," she said, her usual crisp tone subdued. "I feel I owe you an apology." "For what specifically, Linda?" I wasn't going to make this easy. "For misjudging you. For assumptions I made about your contributions to Catherine's upbringing and education." "I see. What you did, investing that money for her future instead of spending it, was admirable. Howard and I have discussed it, and we're both impressed by your foresight and sacrifice." Her words should have felt validating, but they only underscored how thoroughly she had dismissed me before learning of my financial decisions, as if my worth as a mother could be measured in dollars rather than love. "Thank you for calling, Linda," I said neutrally. "Will you be at brunch tomorrow?" The post-wedding brunch at the hotel. I hadn't planned to attend, assuming my presence would only create more tension. "I don't think that would be best for anyone." "I understand," she said. "For what it's worth, I do hope you and Catherine can reconcile eventually." After hanging up, I sat in the quiet hotel room considering my next steps. Catherine and Richard would be leaving for their honeymoon in Bali tomorrow afternoon. I would be flying home to Ohio to my modest house and the life Catherine found so embarrassing. But something had shifted inside me. The weight of Catherine's judgment, which I had carried for so long, had lifted. In its place was a new resolve to live fully and authentically, without apology for who I was or what I valued. I checked out of the hotel early the next morning, avoiding the wedding brunch entirely. The 3-hour drive home gave me time to process everything that had happened. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made several decisions about my future, decisions that had nothing to do with Catherine, and everything to do with reclaiming my own identity. Over the next few weeks, as Catherine and Richard honeymoon in Bali, I moved forward with my plans. I contacted a lawyer to formalize the Nursing Scholarship Foundation. I enrolled in a watercolor painting class I'd been eyeing for years but had never made time for. I joined a hiking group for women over 50. I began renovations on my kitchen, nothing extravagant, but updates that would bring me joy. Catherine made no attempt to contact me during her honeymoon. When she returned, her only communication was a terse email. "We need to talk about the money. When can we meet?" No apology for the slap, no acknowledgement of the hurt she had caused. Just a focus on the money, money that was no longer available to her. My reply was equally brief. "The donation is finalized and irrevocable. There is nothing to discuss." Her response came quickly. "You had no right to make that decision without consulting me. It was meant for my future." This time I didn't immediately reply. I let a full day pass before writing. "The money was never promised to you. It was always mine to use as I saw fit, just as your life is yours to direct. I chose to use it to help others who value education and service, who understand that true worth isn't measured by wealth or status. If you'd like to have a real conversation about our relationship moving forward, I'm open to that. But the financial discussion is closed." Silence followed. Weeks of silence that stretched into a month, then 2. During this time, I received an unexpected visitor. Richard appeared at my door one Sunday afternoon in September, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Richard," I said, surprised. "Catherine isn't with you." "She doesn't know I'm here," he admitted. "May I come in?" I led him into my living room, newly painted a warm sage green that brightened the space considerably. "Your home looks different," he commented, glancing around. "I've been making some changes," I said. "Would you like some tea?" "Over tea and homemade cookies." Richard explained his visit. "Catherine's been struggling since the wedding, since what happened." "I imagine the revelation was shocking for her," I acknowledged. "It's more than that," he said, turning his cup in his hands. "She's angry, yes, but she's also confused. Everything she thought she knew about her accomplishments, her independence, it's been called into question." "That wasn't my intention," I said truthfully. "I never meant for her to doubt her own abilities or intelligence. The financial support didn't diminish her achievements. It just made them possible." Richard nodded slowly. "I've tried to tell her that, but she's fixated on the money itself, what she sees as her lost inheritance." "The money was never the point," I said. "It was a tool, nothing more. What concerns me is that Catherine values it above our relationship." Richard looked down at his hands. "I didn't understand before," he said quietly, "about your relationship with Catherine. I assumed, based on what she told me, that you had been neglectful somehow, too busy working to be present." "I worked to provide for her," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." "I see that now," he acknowledged. "And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." When Richard left, he promised to try to help Catherine understand my perspective. "She's hurt and proud," he said. "But underneath that, I think she misses her mother." I wasn't so sure, but I appreciated his effort to bridge the divide between us. 2 more months passed. Fall turned to early winter. I continued building my new life, volunteering at a literacy program, taking a weekend trip to the mountains with my hiking group, even cautiously beginning to date a kind widower named Frank, who shared my love of classic films. Just before Thanksgiving, I received another email from Catherine. This one was different from her previous demands. "Would you be willing to meet for coffee when we're in town for Thanksgiving, just you and me?" It was the opening I had been waiting for, however small. "Yes," I replied. "I'd like that very much." 6 months after the wedding that had ended so dramatically, I found myself sitting in a small cafe, waiting for Catherine. I'd arrived early, a habit from my nursing days, and chosen a quiet corner table where we could talk privately. When Catherine entered, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the polished, high-fashion appearance I'd grown accustomed to. Her hair was pulled back, simply her makeup minimal, her clothing stylish but understated. She looked younger, somehow more like the daughter I remembered from years ago. "Mum," she said, approaching the table hesitantly. I stood, and after a moment's awkward hesitation, we shared a brief, stiff hug before sitting down. "You look well," I said, meaning it. "Thanks. So do you." She glanced around the cafe. "This is nice. Cozy." Small talk. We were reduced to small talk after all our history. After ordering, tea for me, latte for her, we sat in uncomfortable silence until Catherine finally spoke. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "For the slap. It was unforgivable." "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "And for other things, too. Things I said at the wedding. Before the wedding. A lot of things, actually." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "Richard helped me see some things more clearly," she admitted, "about how I've treated you, about the choices you made for us." "I'm glad you've been reflecting," I said. "I've done a lot of thinking, too." Catherine fidgeted with her napkin. "The money. I was shocked. And angry at first. I felt like my whole life had been built on a lie." Not a lie, I corrected gently. A partial truth. You did earn scholarships. You did work hard. The financial support didn't change that. But it changes how I see myself, she insisted. All those years feeling proud of being self-made, of pulling myself up by my bootstraps. And now I find out there was this safety net I never knew about. Would you have preferred there wasn't one? I asked. She considered this. No, I just wish I'd known. I wish you'd trusted me with the truth. Perhaps I should have, I acknowledged. But I was trying to protect you from exactly the attitude I eventually saw developing, the belief that money defines success or determines happiness. Catherine was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking a lot about Dad, she said finally, about what he would think of the person I've become. The mention of Tom after all these years of Catherine's silence about him caught me off guard. He would be proud of your intelligence and determination, I said honestly, but he valued kindness above achievement. He always did. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. I don't think he'd be very proud of how I've treated you. We can't change the past, I said, but we can choose our path forward. Over the next hour, our conversation continued, sometimes painful, sometimes healing. Catherine explained how the pressure of fitting into Richard's world had amplified her worst insecurities, how she'd felt she needed to erase her background to be accepted, how she'd directed her anxiety about belonging onto me, blaming me for what she perceived as holding her back, rather than acknowledging how I'd launched her forward. Richard's parents have been different since the wedding, she admitted, especially his mother. She keeps talking about your admirable values and suggesting we volunteer together. It's bizarre. I couldn't help laughing. Well, that is unexpected. The thing is, Catherine continued, seeing them suddenly respect you because of a financial decision made me realize how shallow their judgment was in the first place, and by extension, mine. People are complicated, I said. We all have our blind spots. Before we parted, Catherine asked about the nursing scholarship I'd established. It's called the Thomas Turner Memorial Scholarship, I explained, for single parents pursuing nursing degrees. The first recipients start next fall, 5 students who otherwise couldn't afford to continue their education. That's really wonderful, Mum. Catherine's voice was sincere. Dad would love that his legacy is helping others. Yes, he would, I agreed. As we stood to leave, Catherine hesitated. Richard and I are hosting a small dinner tomorrow night. Just family, would you come? It was a small olive branch, but significant. I'd like that, I said. Thank you. Our reconciliation didn't happen overnight. One coffee date and dinner invitation didn't erase decades of complicated history, but it was a beginning, a foundation we could build upon with continued effort and goodwill. Over the next year, Catherine and I established a new kind of relationship, more honest, more equal, with clearer boundaries on both sides. She began therapy to work through her complicated feelings about money, status, and family. I continued pursuing my own interests and building a life that was fully mine, not defined solely by motherhood. Richard proved to be an unexpected ally in our healing process. His own relationship with his parents had evolved after witnessing the consequences of prioritizing status over substance. He encouraged Catherine's efforts to reconnect with her authentic self and supported our fragile rebuilding of trust. The transformation wasn't immediate or perfect. Catherine still occasionally slipped into materialistic thinking or status consciousness, particularly in professional settings. I sometimes found myself falling into old patterns of sacrificing too much to accommodate her. But we were both more aware now, more intentional about the dynamics between us. A breakthrough came at Christmas, a year and a half after the wedding. Catherine and Richard joined me at my home for dinner, something that would have been unthinkable before. As we sat around my dining table, Catherine suddenly reached for my hand. "I found something in Dad's old things," she said, pulling a small envelope from her purse. "Richard and I were organizing our storage unit, and I came across the box of Dad's personal items you gave me after college." She handed me the envelope. Inside was a birthday card Tom had given me on my 30th birthday, the last one before he died. His handwriting, so familiar, even after all these years, filled the inside. "Marilyn, you are the strongest, kindest person I know. The way you love our Catherine with both tenderness and strength teaches me something new every day. Never doubt that you are extraordinary even when you feel ordinary. That's your magic, finding beauty in the everyday, value in the essential. All my love always, Tom." Tears filled my eyes as I read his words. "I never really knew him," Catherine said softly. "Not as an adult. But reading that, seeing how he saw you, it helped me understand something I've been missing all these years." "What's that?" I asked carefully, returning the precious card to its envelope. "That true worth isn't about what you have or how you appear to others. It's about how you love, how you contribute, how you show up day after day for the people who need you." She squeezed my hand. "The way you did for me, even when I couldn't see it." In that moment, I felt a circle closing, the completion of a lesson that had taken far too long to learn, but was all the more valuable for the struggle it had required. When Catherine slapped me at her wedding, she had acted from a lifetime of misplaced values and unexamined assumptions. When I laughed, it was from the sudden recognition of the absurdity of those values. And when I revealed the truth about the money, it wasn't to hurt her, but to finally clear the air between us. The journey since has taught us both valuable lessons. Catherine has learned that authentic relationships matter more than social climbing, that character outlasts possessions. I've learned that sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is letting them find their own way back to what matters, even when the path includes painful detours. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself with someone you love, you know how difficult that balance can be. When did you realize it was time to draw a line to speak your truth, even at the risk of relationship? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more real conversations about family relationships, and share with someone who might be struggling to find their authentic voice within a challenging relationship. Remember, it's never too late to set healthy boundaries and reclaim your self-worth. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.